terms scented with Kale Vapor. Alt-right fascist. Conspiracy theory. Apologist. Gaslighting. Offended. So, it seems to me, I have been involved in all kinds of discussion on the internet. I talk about everything from music, gaming, and tech to politics, philosophy, and all sorts of other things that are sort of related to those fields. And it seems to me that it's becoming somewhat difficult among, as evidenced by whatever happened to the Prisoners of Truth podcast, in which we discussed the Christchurch massacre and the 2020 U.S. presidential election. It seems that any discussion of these ideologies, these violent, hateful ideologies, and any sort of thought outside the range of what is acceptable according to certain institutions, you'll get branded alt-right or alt-left, and it's really kind of authoritarian. You're marked, so your credibility score is lower, and people look at you and their first impression, they're primed to reject you because you're alt-left or alt-right and you're a fascist. But you see, people have been throwing around these terms without reason, for no reason, to the point where it's like calling somebody a racist. These horrible terms that we should be using to point out evil, to point out hatred, they're being used as throwaways. And so now we're calling everybody a Nazi. We're calling everybody a racist, everybody an alt-right fascist. And I think that we might have a culprit, and those are the people that use the kale vapor. They put the kale in their vaporizer and they vape it. Yeah, it's a strange practice. I like the taste of kale, but yeah, I don't think so. So then we have conspiracy theory. Here's a term that people use simply to shut down any kind of reason. Any kind of reason. They'll say, oh, you're noticing, you have good pattern recognition, you're noticing things. And they say conspiracy theorist. It's just a way to shut down. It's just a way to sort of passively or even actively censor another person to use these terms. When you say conspiracy theory, a lot of these conspiracy theories end up as conspiracy fact. So you have to be, I think it's more helpful and healthy to call yourself a conspiracy analyst, because you don't have to believe in anything about what you're researching and what you're dissecting and what you're analyzing. You're not the theorist. You're not the person that has put forth the theory. You're somebody that's just analyzing it, looking at it, pulling it apart, dissecting it, deconstructing it, and trying to find what truth there is in there, if any. And of course, a lot of the folks that like to use this term, tend to believe in their own conspiracy theories. It's something that I think we all kind of contribute to this conspiracy theory epidemic just a bit. Anytime we find sort of a connection between two people or events, and or things that seem to have a connection that is not really in evidence. It's just sort of, oh, well, this would make sense. This would make sense. And as we can see after, as of this recording, the Russiagate Mueller report, the Robert Mueller report. I said his name wrong the first time. How do you say it anyway? Mueller. We make it easy, Bob. Make it easy. I'm getting old, Bob. But a lot of people that had bet their I don't know what they bet. I hope it wasn't anything big, but they bet that the Mueller report would come out and indictments would be made of the President of the United States, Donald Trump. But as I and many, many others on all sides of the political spectrum, right, left, up and down, whatever, everybody, it wasn't a partisan issue. It was a partisan issue to some degree in the context of Democrat and Republican. But in terms of the general viewpoint, most people didn't believe it. Those that study politics and news and media more closely understood the tells for this being a hoax. Russiagate is a hoax. There were some arrests, but it must be noted that any time, I believe it was Paul Manafort that was arrested, and Roger Stone and others. But what you have to realize is if you go digging up dirt in the world of politics and Hollywood and anywhere where there's unbelievable massive amounts of centralized power and access and celebrity and money and wealth, there's going to be corruption because absolute power corrupts absolutely. So they caught some people, and that's great. I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I like it when laws are upheld. But the president is not going to be indicted or impeached for that reason. And he never was. You're going to have a case. Not FISA warrants for Steele dossiers that are made up of absolute fiction, with maybe little sprinklings of truth about people that are not Donald Trump or his family or his close associates. So I'm not going to be an apologist because that's what people, some of these terms, the Kale Vapor, I definitely sense Kale Vapor when somebody calls me an apologist. I'm like, do you have any kale at home? Is there any kale in your kitchen? How about in your vaporizer? Apologist. Yeah. So this is assuming guilt, sort of casting it onto somebody. Like you have guilt that you should be apologizing for something. Your apology is needed. You're defending something that, you're defending something that needs to be apologized for. It goes pretty well with, innocent until proven guilty. Some people say guilty until proven innocent. Guilty until proven innocent. And I say, no. We have laws for a reason. We need some order. It can't just be entropy and chaos. We need some order. As irrational beings, we need a bar to hang on to. And you can decide what kind of bar that is on your own, with your own imagination. But don't imagine a crime or any sort of wrongdoing or anything that should be apologized for and say apologist. Because clearly, if somebody is taking their reputation and attempting to argue on behalf of themselves or somebody else or something else, and you're calling them an apologist, it's just, I don't know. Maybe switch to edibles. Yeah. kale edibles at your local grocer. Gaslighting. Gaslighting. Look, gaslighting is a thing. It exists. You know, convincing somebody that their reality is inconsistent, that they are somehow just... It is a thing. To lie and create a false narrative about somebody's entire world and gaslight them. And when they push you and they say, please, you know, pull back the curtain. Pull back the curtain. And you don't. You're a gaslighter. You're trying to convince somebody that what really happened didn't happen. But it's not gaslighting if you get a point wrong online when you're talking to people or in person. It's if you get a point, especially in a debate, wrong, it doesn't mean you're gaslighting people. You know, if you have an opinion and you're stating it, it's not gaslighting. It can be if you're deliberately acting in bad faith and putting forth information that's deliberately misinformation. That's trolling. And that could be, you know, you're starting to get into the gaslighting territory under the popular definition. But again, like we were saying earlier in the tweet video, if you throw around a word constantly, it loses all sense of meaning. And right now, gaslighting is being misused, because it's being used to say, oh, you know, you've provided misinformation. Well, you're trying to convince me that my reality isn't real. That's not gaslighting. That's just having a Socratic or an intellectual discussion. And of course, we all know, as we've known since PC, politically correct culture, became the norm within the past 20 years, especially. But even before that, I remember growing up as a kid, and we had Tipper Gore. We had moral panic back then. We've always had it. Everything runs in cycles. You know, these things run in cycles. So, offended. I'm offended. You've offended me. I have been offended. You've offended my sensibility. Just, no. No. Okay.